Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keegan, and welcome back to the channel and something new on the channel. This is Sundown. Now, on Sundown, I'm going to be talking all about the Gold Coast Suns. Now, that's not everyone's cup of tea, and I completely understand. But if you are a Gold Coast Suns fan, or you're interested in a Gold Coast Suns fan's opinion on their games or stuff revolving the Suns in the AFL, do stick around and do hang out and just give it a listen and see what you think. So what I'm planning to do is after every game, I'm going to be running a chat about the game we just played, and then I'm going to talk about the game upcoming. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the game against Gold Coast and North Melbourne over the weekend. So the score was 7-13, 55 to the Suns, to 5-9-39 to the North Melbourne Football Club, meaning the Gold Coast Suns won by 16 points. And as a Gold Coast Suns fan, I must say this is the most relieved I've ever been. It was worrying because to half time it was a pretty tight game. We got ahead, and then we got ahead by a couple of goals, and then in the third quarter the Roos came back. And as a Gold Coast Suns fan that's followed this team since the start, I can tell you that I was panicking. We've all seen this before. We've all seen the Suns down tools and put up the white flag when stuff gets too hard. So North Melbourne got a run on 4 or 5 goals. We ended up only being about 2 points up in the heading into the last quarter, and it was good to see that the Suns could hold on for the first time in a while I can remember. They were challenged, and they accepted the challenge, and they thrived off the challenge, and they pushed forward, and they got a win. So most people sort of seem to skip over the game. They know the Suns won, the Roos won. They think it's Spoon Bowl 2018. But I'm just going to quickly talk about the weather as well. It was an absolute swamp bowl 2018, if you will. I don't know. I'm happy that we won, but at the same time, I'm sort of really disappointed that we didn't get to see a clean game, because I think when the conditions are good for it, I think the Suns can play a really, really good brand of football, and I think they can really, really challenge some teams. As much as people are talking them down this year, I think that they can actually do something. They're probably not going to make finals. Don't say that I think they're going to make finals. I don't think they'll make finals. But I reckon we can get 8 wins. I reckon we can get around 8 wins. And to be fair, that would be a good season. So as far as the game goes, going into the game with the weather, I actually thought we'd struggle. North Melbourne have a good contested ball outfit led by Cunnington and Zeeble. They're two players that do really seem to thrive off those messy conditions, and I think we handled it really well. We had the likes of Swallow and Young and Lyons and Fiorini in the midfield. Now, and they did a really good job. One thing that the Suns do really well is they don't have an A-grade midfielder. Probably the closest thing we have to an A-grade midfielder is probably David Swallow. But I still don't think he's a A-grade midfielder. I think Swallow's a B+ midfielder. I think he's a really good midfielder. He's never going to be the type that's going to have a breakaway game, kick 4 goals like a Dangerfield or an Ablett or whatever. But he's a good midfielder. I think Lyons is the same. I think Lyons is a good B-grade midfielder, and I think that those two, if they're getting in doing the dirty work, I think that's a really, really good thing, and they can feed it out to our more talented, flashy players. So you got the likes of Swallow and Lyons and Miller getting in and under, and then they can feed it out to the likes of Jack Bowes, who had probably his best game for the club, 20 touches and a goal. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, sort of looking at the stats, but if you watch the game, you could tell that he had one of the biggest impacts on the field. He had the most meters gained, and he just looked really, really clean with the ball. And I was so happy to see him do it, because he's a local lad. He's a Queensland boy. He's from Cairns, so he was in front of his hometown, which is great to see. He performed out of his skin, and I hope that he can continue this form on to the next couple of weeks. So, a lot was also made about the forward line, about Tom Lynch. Can he have any sort of effect in the forward line in a wet game? And to be fair, he didn't have an amazing game. He only took, I think, 4 marks. But the thing is, he laid tackles. He laid about 6-7 tackles. He looked really, really good when the ball hit the ground. Other than a lot of big players, and I think, what's his name? Ben Brown. I think Ben Brown suffered from that a bit too. That he, once the ball hit the deck, Ben Brown really, really couldn't affect the contest. Whereas if the ball hit the deck around Lynch was able to affect the contest, whether he was able to get his hands on the ball or he was able to tackle someone around him. He was very, very handy for that. And I think that while he probably wouldn't be happy with his game because he didn't kick any goals and he didn't really dominate, I reckon he was serviceable. I think he was a pretty good player. I reckon our second best player behind Bose for the game was Jared Witts. I thought Jared Witts was amazing. It's probably the best game I've seen him play in really conditions that did not suit him. In the way I just said that Ben Brown didn't really affect the contest when the ball hit the deck. When the ball hit the deck, Jared Witts was around and he did a really, really good job. He laid 5 tackles. He had 25 touches, 21 kicks, 4 handballs. He had 34 hit-outs, 4 marks, and he almost kicked a goal. He kicked it behind. And for ruckman, like Jared Witts, who has never been considered and probably won't ever be considered in that top echelon of ruckman like a Gawn or a Nat Nui or a Sandilands in his prime, Witts is someone that can really, really do well at the Suns. He can give the Suns first use of the ball, and that is all I would want to see. So, the big question around the game was, should the game have actually taken place? There was talk about AFL officials who were at the Hawthorn-Collingwood game were watching the Suns North Melbourne game on their phone, and they apparently at quarter time had called and said, do you want to call off the game? And I'm sort of happy we didn't, because we ended up getting the win, so I'm glad we didn't call off the game. But I'm a bit sort of, as I said before, I would have liked to seen it played in better conditions, but I'm glad we didn't call off the game because we actually got into the game, we actually won. What probably helped us in that is the fact that during pre-season we had a pretty poor run of weather, for lack of a better term. A lot of our interclub games and our JLT2 game against Brisbane were played pretty much in drenched, wet conditions like we had in Cairns. So I feel that might have prepared us a bit better for the Cairns game. But we'll wait and see if that has an effect on us this coming week. So, before we move on, I'm going to give a 3-2-1. So I'm going to give a medal on this, call it a show, if you will. Probably not a medal, not a physical medal. Obviously, I'll probably will never get a chance to do that. But I'm going to give a medal or an award to the player that is going to be the Suns' best player this year. So I'm going to do it like the Brownlow. There's a 3-2-1 to the Suns player for that game. So I'm going to give 3-2-1 votes. I'm going to then record them, and then I'll give you some updates on as the season gets on. And then when we get to the end of the season, we will have a winner. And I'll be interested to see if it lines up with the best and fairest for the Suns, or even the Brownlow if we're going to go that far. All right, so my 3-2-1. So I've already talked about a couple of these players, so you probably already know. I'm going to give Jack Bowes the 3. I thought he was a really, really good player and affected the contest. He only had 20 touches, but the 20 touches he had were absolutely amazing. I'm going to give the 2 to Jared Witts because he was an absolute dominant force in the ruck and he really, really gave his first use, and I feel like he really got a hold of Goldstein, which is not an easy thing to do. So Witts is going to get the 2 votes, and my 1 vote is actually going to go to Aaron Young. He had 26 touches, 3 marks. He had 9 tackles, and he kicked a goal. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed about the Suns recently is the recruits they've brought in. So Aaron Young get the 1 vote. So 3 to Bowes, 2 to Witts, 1 to Young, and we'll leave it at that. Before I talk about next week's game, I just want to quickly talk about something that I've sort of noticed with the Suns. And that is the recruitment. So you look at the likes of Young and Witts and Lions. These are players at their original club that didn't really get a run at it. That sort of got pushed back in the line a bit at their club, and you can probably add Holman to that too because he did get delisted from Carlton. He had a really, really good game as well. These are players that had a go at their club, and they got pushed back and back and back in the order into the fact that they weren't starting games for their first team. So what's really excited me is that these players have now come into Suns and they've started to really, really dominate. Now, Lyons had 21 touches, so it wasn't his best game, but he's had a lot of good games. Last season he played really, really well in a lot of games. I think he got 30 plus a few times, which was really, really good. Rose is another one that's sort of interesting. He's a bit like he's a bit maligned in Sun circles. Like he's a good player to have that has a solid head on his shoulders and a good bit of experience around the group. He's not the best player, and if we're going to talk people coming into the team this week, I would probably think about taking Rosa out on a deck like Eddie had. But these sort of players have been really, really good pickups for the Suns as of recently. Other than sort of Hanley, this is one off the top of my head that I can think of. The recruits to the Suns, the mature recruits we brought to the Suns have actually been really, really positive. Now, that's not to say Hanley won't be positive. He's just had an absolutely awful run with injury and personal issues and family issues. So that's just the way it is. But I think the club has last couple of years has brought in some really, really good, solid, mature players, and these are the sort of players we should have brought in when the club started 8 years ago. Now, you can say all you want about Gary Ablett and bringing him in and the decision to bring him in, but at the end of the day, it hasn't been successful. We haven't played finals. We haven't really looked like playing finals, and people will say, "Oh, you've lost your best player. You lost Gary Ablett." But to be fair, I'm happy we've lost him. There's a weight's been lifted off the club. The Gary Ablett weight, if you will. The weight that talks about how we always have to pass it to Gary. Gary is the center of attention at the club. The cameras are only interested, and the media's only interested in around what Gary Ablett's doing. Now, this year you could argue that Tom Lynch has taken that role because he's out of contract. But I feel the same way. If Tom Lynch was to get to the point where he's going to become a distraction for the group going forward, if he was to stay on or he was to extend his contract by a year and we go through this whole thing again next year or something like that, if he got to be a distraction of the club, I would want him gone too. I only want players that are 100% invested in the club, and you could tell by the end Gary wasn't invested. Was he faking injury at the end of last season? Who knows? But he wasn't. You could tell he wasn't invested. I only want people at the Suns that are 100% invested, and if Lynch was to get his eye race somewhere else, sorry about that. That was just a game in the background starting up for some reason. So if I was to, if it was to get to that with Tom Lynch and he wasn't, and we could see he wasn't giving his 100% to the team, then I'd be happy to move him on. I actually think, to be fair, if we got it, if I love Tommy so much and I do not want him to leave, I'd give him my own money if it meant him staying at the club. But if he was to leave, I don't think it would be the big disaster that that the media are making it out to be. There's no one person bigger than the team. Everyone is as important to the team as everyone else. It's a whole team effort. It's a whole collective. It's all 22 players that are picked, and even the players outside of the team that are helping push the players in the team to be the best they can be. I don't want it to be a one player team like it was with Ablett, and like the media is starting to talk about with Lynch, because he is the big interest. He is the one that could be heading to Melbourne, and we know that is the epicenter of the media of AFL. So of course there's a lot of interest around it, but I don't want us to devolve to that. We are more than a one player team, and that's what I want us to be. And as an example of a player that's come in and seems to have bought in is someone like Lockie Weller, who we did pay overs for, but he looked really good on the weekend in the wet. He was just an absolute classy player. He He got his hands on the ball. You can tell he's never going to be a 30-plus touch player. But he'll get 20, 25, and if he does with those 20, 25, if he can hit targets, he can do the right thing, then he is going to be a really, really good player. We spent pick 2 on him. For pick 2, we got Lockie Weller, and we ended up getting Charlie Ballard back in the form of pick 40 or 41. So if those two players end up playing 150, 200 games for the Suns, you could say that that pick 2 was well spent. Okay, so now that we've sort of talked over what's happened this past week and sort of a bit of a topic that I wanted to talk about, we're going to talk into round 2. Now, Suns won, coming up against Carlton. Carlton had a good game. They played well against Richmond, but they didn't get the win. So they're going to be hungry. They would definitely want to win. They're playing their first home game at Etihad, which I don't know. I think that they play better at Etihad. I wouldn't be 100% sure. I don't pay a lot of attention to Carlton, but they've got a few good players you need to keep an eye out for. Cripps had a really, really good game. Charlie Curnow kicked 5 goals. He looked really, really switched on. If he can do that every week, he's going to be an absolute player and a half, and the Blues have got an absolute gem there. And they've also Cade Simpson, who probably before the start of this year probably was seen to be on his last legs, but if he plays like he did against Richmond, he'll probably get another year on his contract again. I think he's been helped by Doherty going out injured. Cade Simpson's been free to play that Doherty role, and he's going to get a lot of ball, and he's going to do very well with that. So the Blues are going to be a formidable team. Injuries for them. The one I can remember off the top of my head, without doing too much research into the Blues, is Cruiser. He had a sore groin. I think it was a groin, but he was injured. He was off for the 3rd term, and he came back on the 4th, and he looked pretty proppy. So he's the one I'm sort of interested to see what happens. If he doesn't play, and Jared Witts is able to sort of ruck against a Levi Casbolt, I think Jared Witts can have his way, and it could go a bit of a way to giving the Suns the advantage in the midfield. Now, I will say we don't have the A grader that Cripps is in our midfield, as I've already mentioned. But if Witts is giving us first use in the middle, then I really do think that we could really benefit from that. So, Carlton, that was Carlton. For us, as far as a team and injuries and all that, we don't really have any. We've got Hanley, who's probably out this week, but heading into next week we should have him back. In the NEAFL, they've got a practice game against Brisbane during the weekend, and Lemons and Wig are both going to be playing in that. So the only real injury issue we do have is Hanley. Everyone else should be available, maybe bar Peter Wright, because they're taking their time with him to make sure he's 100%. But everyone else should be right, and that's something the Suns have not had in a long time, is a pretty small injury list, and I think that's going to be very handy this upcoming week. So, my tip for this week's game, it's going to be all won and lost, I think, in the forward line for the Suns. If Lynch can get off the handle like he did last year against Carlton at Etihad, he kicked 7 goals, which was an absolutely amazing effort. If he can do that again this year, then I think the Suns win. But he's going to be playing on Liam Jones, who wasn't there last time. Last time, Lynch played on Rowe, I think Sam Rowe's his name, and he tore him to shreds. So this week, he's going to be playing on Liam Jones, who has been reinvented as a defender and has done a really, really amazing job. Will Lynch get a hold of him? Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see also the changes that the Suns make. I can see Aaron Hall coming back in. Barlow was left out last week, so who does Barlow come back in? Does Brody come in, who was left out last week as well? There's a few players that are on the periphery that could definitely come into this team, and that's a good problem for the Suns to have. Competition for positions is always very, very positive. As far as my tip goes, I'm always going to tip the Suns, so I'm definitely tipping the Suns. As for the margin, I think it'll be a pretty close game. I reckon I'm going to tip the Suns by 12 points. It'll be a close game, and hopefully we can hold on. We can show the same sort of mental toughness that we did against North Melbourne this week. Hopefully we can carry over to this week against Carlton, and hopefully we can get the 4 points, and we can go 2-0 to start the season, which would be a positive after everyone's basically tipped us for the spoon. So 2 wins off the top would help us quite a bit. And hopefully that would help us avoid the bottom 4, because that's basically my goal at the end of the year. I don't want to finish bottom 4 again. I want to finish above that. I'd love to finish. If we can't finish in finals, that's fine. I'd like us to finish around 10th. That would be an absolutely amazing season. Of course, if we could play finals, that would be amazing too. But I don't think we're going to get there. I think if we could finish 10th, that would be an absolutely amazing job. And yeah, Suns by 12 points this week against Carlton. 2-0, heading over to Fremantle next week as well. Anyway, guys, that was the first episode of Sundown. I hope you enjoyed. It's very cathartic for me because I get to sit and I get to talk about football. If you're aware, I'm over here in Manchester. I don't get to talk football that often, so it's nice to sort of talk about football. It lets me vent a little bit on the weeks that the Suns are awful. But on the weeks that the Suns are great, then I get to talk about how good we played. And so I'm really happy with that. I'm really happy with us heading into Carlton. I think we're hitting some good form, and I reckon it's a 50-50 game, and I reckon we can come out on top. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video on YouTube, subscribe so you don't miss any of the episodes of Sundown or any of my Super Coach episodes. If that is what you're into, I'm hoping to release one of these a week. I'm going to try and stick with it, and hopefully I hear from you in the comments below. Let me know what your tips are for the game. If you did catch the Gold Coast North Melbourne game, what did you think of it? Do you think it should have been called off? And also, where do you think the Suns will finish on the ladder this year? Do you think they're going to be 18th? Or do you think they're going to be up towards, maybe not in finals, but closer to the finals than they were the previous year? Do let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Well, thank you for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you later.